It's time for the Kim Hammer Show, where you'll learn how your state government affects you, your family, and community. Here's Kim Hammer.
Hey, thanks for joining me here on the Kim Hammer Show. Hope you're having a great day, and I think we've got a topic that seems to be at the top of the list as far as things that people are interested in. It deals with the leaking of the Supreme Court document regarding Roe versus Wade and all the things that are around it. And so what I wanted to do today was I have on the show today, on the Kim Hammer Show, I've got calling in Justice Barbara Webb, who is on the Arkansas Supreme Court. Don't confuse that with the U.S. Supreme Court. Maybe one day we will hear her name. You never know what will happen in the future. But then also I'm also going to have Jerry Cox with Family Counsel that'll be on, because with the apparent decision that may be coming down the way, we want to talk about the bills that we already have in place that are going to be able to, the trigger bill, and we want to talk about how that may play out. Also talk about some of the strategic positioning as to whether we ran a bill before, whether we didn't run a bill before, and now it seems to be upon us that we see a decision regarding Roe versus Wade. Good, bad, ugly, however, it's going to come out. We'll talk about how the current legislation that we have and how that'll affect Arkansas and our ability to move forward on the subject of abortion. But first of all, let's turn toward the matter of the leak of the Supreme Court document. And Barbara, thank you for being on the Kim Hammer Show today.
Good morning. It's good to be with you again.
So let me ask you, let's start off about the structure of the Supreme Court. And I know there'll be some similarities, I would believe, probably between the way the Arkansas Supreme Court and the U.S. Supreme Court is structured, I would presume, but I want you to straighten me out on that. What are the similarities as far as like the people that would work at the Supreme Court and you as a justice who you can pick to work around you and help get everything prepared to move a case forward? So kind of start at the beginning of the structure of how the Supreme Court employees are laid out and how that plays a part in what you do as a justice.
Okay, and I really can speak to the structure of the Arkansas Supreme Court more accurately than I can the U.S. Supreme Court, but I can tell you what I know and what the similarities are. Each justice has their own staff, if you will, that they're responsible for hiring. And in Arkansas, each justice has two lawyers that work for the justice, that their job is to help what we consider staff attorneys, to help write memos, detailing reasoning, to help the justice get prepared on each case. I believe at the Supreme Court, that's four. They each have four justices, is where I read somewhere. Four staff attorneys, that's their job. And they're often called law clerks, but they're actually they're full attorneys who have got quite a bit of experience in the law. It's quite an honor to clerk for a U.S. Supreme Court justice and for an Arkansas Supreme Court justice. But that's basically, they have their staff attorneys that really are the people, along with the justices, that dig in, if you will, into the law and into the facts of the case, into the briefs that are submitted, and trying to reach their decisions in each of the cases. And do you want me to go through the process?
Yeah, go through the process just to give people an understanding, because, you know, when you're dealing with a heavy case like this, or even here at the Arkansas Supreme Court where you have to deal with heavy cases involving whether it's the election laws that were recently before you, or any of the other, legislation laws that are appealed up to you, give them an understanding of how the process works to where it gets up to the point that you actually have to make a determination.
All right. Well, and again, the way the process starts, the cases are assigned to the justices in a near equal distribution. In Arkansas, a justice if they're assigned the case, that means they're considered the main justice, and then another justice is considered the backup. And that just means that justice will be the one presenting the case to the other justices in conference. And if it turns out that justice does have if there's a majority of the court that's in agreement with that main justice, then they will be the author of the opinion, at least at the initial draft. I think the Supreme Court does it a little bit differently. I think I read that the U.S. Supreme Court, the Chief Justice actually assigns the cases as to who's going to author the opinions, or at least the most senior judge that it has the majority is the one that assigns who's going to author the opinion, which is a little different than Arkansas. But anyway, what happens is the case is assigned. At that point, the case is submitted to the court. Either the court has oral arguments or we go directly into conferences. But prior to those conferences and or the oral arguments, each justice's staff attorneys have taken the case and they've written memos outlining the case and detailing the reasoning behind the actual arguments that have been presented to the court. And then from that, all the justices go to conference and discuss it, and based on that conference, determines if there is a majority or if, and sometimes there's not. Sometimes there's a plurality, which means justices may be agreeing, but for different reasons, and sometimes some justices want to go back and do more research, whatever. You know, there's all kinds of different results can happen at that point. But at that being said, if there is a majority, either the main judge or the backup, depending on who has it, or if it's not either of them, it goes to the senior justice to write the opinion with the majority. And then that is a draft opinion. It's circulated among the justices, much like the one that was leaked here, and is not necessarily the final opinion. That's the thing that's real clear, and I think even Chief Justice Roberts made a point of saying that this was not the final decision that had been leaked, and that it could have been changed significantly since the February date. And that would be true in the Arkansas process. A draft opinion doesn't always wind up the same at the end. And then once the final majority if there is enough votes for it to be a majority in Arkansas, that would be 4. In U.S. Supreme Court, that would be 5. Once they have 5 signed on to an actual opinion, then the other justices can either write concurring opinions or dissenting opinions, or just concur or dissent without opinion. And and sometimes, like as I mentioned, that there could be a soft majority where justices kind of can still change their vote, but they still move that opinion forward, trying to get to the final opinion. And sometimes what that means is someone might ask for something to be deleted out of the opinion, or they might ask for a quote. They might ask for a change in just the wording of a particular argument, the insertion of one word or the deletion of one word, to be more in line with what their belief of the law is.
So let me ask you, the draft opinion then is what we might call a breathing document. It's a work in progress. It's not the final outcome as far as what the court is going to determine or how the court is going to take a position, correct?
Right. Now, if it's, and again, I think this has been identified as a draft opinion from the potential majority. I mean, that could give an indication of what the result is going to be. It just doesn't mean that the opinion will be written exactly the same way. And it could be that the result could change, but it's also likely that it could mean that that there are 5 justices that have agreed to the result of the case.
So who would have had access to a draft opinion to leak it?
Well, and I think that's what's going to be the nature of the investigation that I believe the Chief Justice indicated the marshal of the U.S. Supreme Court is conducting. But I mean, I think I've seen discussions that say as many as 50 people could have had access at the U.S. Supreme Court level. It would probably be about half that in Arkansas. But, mainly it would be the internal staff of the court. It would be the law clerks, potentially their administrative assistants, potentially the justices themselves, and whoever, but I will tell you that the court takes significant measures both in the hiring process and in the formality process to stress confidentiality. And so, but those would be the people that would have access. And, of course, there's certain IT standards that are used to also protect access to the drafts. And, and there's, those are guarded drafts. And, I'm sure there are times when accidentally someone might have access to something they shouldn't have, but it would typically be there's shredders that are used to get rid of draft opinions, things like that. Now, some of them may be maintained for historical purposes, but again, there is a confidentiality process.
Does a leaked draft have any outcome as far as the judge's ability to hear the case without being prejudiced or having bias toward the outcome because the brief reveals how they may be thinking, or is that a latitude that is given to Supreme Court justices where, it leaked, it's bad, somebody's probably going to lose their job on it, should lose their job over it, because, in my opinion, they violated a sacred trust that is no longer there between that person and the court to do something like this. But will it actually have a negative effect upon how the justices may rule in the case when it comes before them?
That, again, whether a justice has to recuse or not is really a choice of that justice. In this case, I would not think it would cause a justice to recuse. I think that, obviously this is an egregious breach of trust, and one that whoever is responsible, if it's one person or more than one person, should be held accountable for, potentially face both, I would think, some ethical issues as well as potential criminal issues. But that being said, I think that the justices themselves, the only thing that they would be concerned about is that they stay with the process and not, I don't think whoever did this, if their purpose was to try to coerce or intimidate a justice or expose them to some type of threat or their families because of the way they are believe, or they, that, to me, that would be the thing that the justice would want to avoid. And I don't think this is going to change that in this particular case.
Okay. One question, going back to something you said earlier, as far as the assignment of the cases, how are the cases assigned here in Arkansas with the Supreme Court?
Again, in Arkansas, they're randomly assigned through the clerk's office to each, and equally assigned. So when the assignments come through, in Arkansas there's 7, so each 7 justices would be assigned a case, and then also assigned a backup case for that particular submission, is what we call them in Arkansas. And usually we have, at least, those cases are coming through the process. At the point it comes to the court for submission, the parties and the attorneys they've already submitted the record of the procedure below. They've submitted the briefs. All the briefing has been completed. So it's just ready to go at that point. And at the U.S. Supreme Court, it may be done a little bit differently, but I don't know how that one's done at the U.S. Supreme Court.
Okay. Well, we've had Barbara Webb on. I've got Jerry Cox that's about to come on, and we're going to get into the political side of it, which I don't really need to drag you into. Appreciate the background of the, just the workings of the court. And the one thing I guess I would say or wanted to point out is that for the leak to have occurred, it would have had to have been a very intentional thing, which seemed maybe like a no-brainer to some people, but somebody had a motive, I would think, that they chose to leak the draft opinion out before it actually became, where it shouldn't be. Let me ask you this before I let you go. With the draft opinion, it is a violation of the rules of conduct, I would say, in the Supreme Court working. Is it a violation for a draft opinion to be leaked? where there's some punitive action that could be taken against whoever did it?
Well, again, the rules of conduct that apply, I'm sure that there would be a violation of the internal rules of the U.S. Supreme Court, and that would cause, I'm sure that whoever, if it is an employee, they would face sanctions. In fact, I believe even, obviously, I think being terminated would be the least of their concerns. I think they would also face other sanctions for their career as well. They are licensed attorneys, and they would be subject to ethical considerations as far as their practice of law. Then again, whether there would be criminal would be, again, depending on what they are able to establish as to what their purpose was. And also, I guess there could be a theft of government property involved. So that's something I guess we'll just have to wait to see what the investigation reveals.
All right, very good. Well, you've been listening on the Kim Hammer Show to Justice Barbara Webb with the Arkansas Supreme Court. I appreciate your insight, and I appreciate you taking personal time away to be on the show today, and wish you the best, and thank you for joining me here on the Kim Hammer Show today, Barbara.
Thank you. Y'all have a great day.
You too. All right, joining me now is Jerry Cox by phone. He's got to be at a speaking engagement in a little bit, and Jerry, I appreciate you taking time to be on the Kim Hammer Show today. I may have lost him.
And
there you are.
Get to be out there in front of all your listeners. So glad to be here.
Thanks, Jerry. Hey, the subject of the day is about the leak of the draft opinion with regards, and I've just had on I had on Justice Barbara Webb with our Supreme Court, which, a little comparison, but not equal comparison, but nonetheless, whether it happened here or whether it happened there, certainly a violation of ethics and trust. I would think that somebody leaked the draft opinion. However, with it being out there, how do you feel that this is going to impact the future of Arkansas if it goes the direction that the draft would appear that the justices may be leaning toward?
Well, it looks like it will impact the future of Arkansas exactly the way the General Assembly intended it to impact, and the way the vast majority of people in Arkansas want it to impact. And that is, if this goes through, as it appears it may, then Roe v. Wade will be struck down, along with probably Planned Parenthood v. Casey, one of the other court cases. And if that happens, the good laws that the General Assembly has passed over the last few years will then be enforceable. And if those laws are enforced, then abortion in Arkansas should be illegal except for the purpose of saving the life of the mother. And there are actually multiple laws that would support that. But the big takeaway from this is the laws that have been enjoined will then be enforceable, and it's a new day in Arkansas if that happens.
We held off passing multiple other laws, or one primary law that would have added another layer to abortions here in Arkansas. And I look around at the other states since we've gotten out of session, and there are other states that have passed Texas-style law. Some have done some other unique items. Looking back now that we're right on the threshold of the Supreme Court coming out with a ruling, especially if this draft opinion holds true to the course that it's going, or appears that it is going, what is your opinion as far as, did we do the right thing in holding off doing anything else? I know there were some letters that were put out and shared, from other legal experts. We had that discussion back then. Now that it would appear that we're right there on the threshold of it, do you think that we did the right thing in going about it the way that we did with what other states have done?
Yes, I'm still satisfied with that decision. One never knows. I mean, none of us has a crystal ball. You make the best decision you can. But based on my discussions with the attorneys at the Attorney General's office who are charged with defending these good laws and seeing that they're enforced, it was their strong recommendation to me that we not pass any more laws anticipating this very thing, that the court would overturn Roe. And if that happens, then the good guys are going to go to federal court and tell the judges, hey, we need to enforce these laws. And the bad guys are going to go to federal court and say, no, there's ambiguity in the law, and the law doesn't need to be enforced. We need to argue about this some more, and abortions would then continue. So this just makes the landscape a lot cleaner for those who are going to be charged with defending the good laws we already had. Kim, you guys passed the strongest abortion law in the country in 2021. You passed a strong one in 2019, and both of those say that if Roe is reversed, in the event that it's reversed, that abortion becomes illegal in Arkansas except to save the life of the mother. That's way stronger than the so-called Texas abortion law, which makes allowances for abortions up to 6 weeks, I believe, of pregnancy, and some things like that. And so could we have passed another law? Sure. Do we need another law? In this era, I don't believe we did. I don't believe it was the right time to pass another law. So, but I think the takeaway then from this is, hey, all that's behind us. We have to look ahead. And first of all, none of us knows for sure what the final decision of the Supreme Court will be. We're making a bunch of assumptions, and that's good because it does appear that Roe will be overturned. But, you know, Kim, we've known other cases where a justice would flip their vote right at the very end and turn the decision the other way. And it's my opinion that that's why this leak is out there, so that people can intimidate and harass and carry on trying to sway the justices somehow to change their vote. I don't think it was just some accidental thing or whatever. I think there was a lot of thought put into that leak. And I think that the pro-abortion forces think that somehow this is going to give them an opportunity to try to push and bully the justices to a point where one might change their vote. But we'll see. We'll probably know by June or early July.
I think somebody would have to be living under a rock not to think that this was an orchestrated event, that somebody purposely, intentionally leaked it in order to get a reaction. One of the things I heard said, you know, listening through the last week of all the talk shows and whatnot, is that within an hour you had protesters that were out there primarily, opposing the direction that the Supreme Court looked like it was going to be going in. It's hard for me to imagine that anybody could be driving around with those signs and, not anticipate that something was going to happen in order to, begin that pressure point, especially here with the elections that are coming up in various states. We're right here on the threshold of early voting, which starts Monday, by the way, so you need to get out and vote. And then we've got the elections coming up this fall. So let me ask you, can you hang out for a second, because I've got some more questions to ask you when we come back.
My other appointment has been delayed, so
okay.
I have a lot more time.
All right, well, good deal. You're listening to the Kim Hammer Show here on 101.1 FM The Answer. I've had on Justice Barbara Webb with the Arkansas Supreme Court. Previously, I've got Jerry Cox with Family Counsel on. We're going to lay over after the break, have him come back, talk about this and a few other little topics while we've got it on there. I do want to put out a reminder. Early voting starts Monday, so please make sure that you get out and vote early, so in case something comes up, you don't miss your opportunity to vote. It is an important election cycle for the primary this time around, so please make sure you get out to vote. We'll be back in just a minute. Welcome back to the Kim Hammer Show here on 101.1 FM. The Answer. I want to remind you that you can go up to my website, which is www.thekimhammershow.com. Keep up with current event and other articles that are dropped in there periodically that just might be of interest to you, and share the page, if you would, with your friends so that have other followers keep up with things that are of current interest and current topics. All right, so Jerry, I've got Jerry Cox with Family Counsel on. One of the things, and I'm reading a statement from an article that was published earlier, it said the publication of the draft opinion rocked Washington, triggering waves of shock and fury from Democrats who are now pushing for Congress to immediately codify abortion rights through legislation. The rush is on in order to do something at the federal level, and how would that play out as the next month or two unfolds, coming up to when the opinion of the Supreme Court is going to come out?
Well, that statement really highlights the new era that we, I believe, are headed into, and that is an era when the Biden administration will look for all kinds of sneaky ways to promote abortion, through executive orders and through the way they operate, federally. Think about all the clinics and hospitals that are on military bases and so forth, where they're probably going to push to be sure that abortion is very, very available under whatever authorities the federal government has. So it would behoove our elected lawmakers to stop that and tell the Biden administration, no, you can't do that. So that's one thing we need to look at. The other thing is, don't expect, if Roe v. Wade let's say Roe v. Wade gets reversed on June 15th, don't expect all the abortion clinics just in Arkansas to shut down the next day or that day. I think what will happen is the ACLU, Planned Parenthood, they're going to rush to federal court, and they're going to file all kinds of legal action there. The Attorney General's lawyers will be there saying, hey, our laws need to be enforced, and there will be a legal battle that will ensue that could go on, I believe, for weeks or possibly months before it's all sorted out. And so, Arkansas has laws on the books against abortion that date back to the pre-Roe era. They go back to the I believe the 1960s or earlier. And so those laws will be enforceable at that point, as will many of the laws, Kim, that you, as a lawmaker, have voted for. I believe you and I counted up one time. I think you voted for 44 pro-life bills over the last, 10 years or so. And some of those have been enjoined by the courts. If they have been, those should be in play. And so there will be a lot of moving parts in motion right there as soon as Roe is overturned. So I would say it may be late summer, maybe fall, maybe later before the courts would be able to get all this sorted out. And so the fight regarding abortion is not going to end if this court decision goes the way we think it will, which is a good thing, because the people that are pro-abortion are going to be right back at the legislature trying to make abortion in Arkansas legal. They're going to be out in California and New York and places like that trying to ensure that it remains legal. And so the debate over abortion will continue. I believe the pro-life side is winning, and that's a real good thing. But I do think that we need to focus more on reducing the demand for abortion. We need to bolster these pregnancy help centers around the state, of which there are almost 50. And I know, Kim, I believe you and others voted for $1 million appropriation for those centers to help them do their good work to help women with unplanned pregnancies. I think we need to focus a lot in that area, because if we are going to make abortion mostly illegal, then we got to step up and be sure there's help there for women and girls that have unplanned pregnancies.
When the trigger bill that we have in place, do you see that that'll get challenged in court? Because it was a bill that was one thing we talked about early on back in the spring was that bill may potentially be challenged on the merits that it was a bill that was passed on the presumption that something would occur in the future. You have any indication or anything that would lead you to be inclined to think that would be challenged in court?
I have no specifics, but don't you think that the pro-abortion forces are going to pull out all the stops and throw everything they can at trying to stop these good laws from being enforced? Really, there are at least three laws to consider. First one is Amendment 68, which was passed in 1988 by the people of Arkansas, a statewide vote. Says that Arkansas will protect the life of every unborn child from conception until birth as much as the federal Constitution allows. And see, that law is specifically elastic in that, hey, whatever the federal authorities allow, that's how much we're going to protect the unborn here in Arkansas. That is written into our Constitution. And if we are going to abide by that, then that means that our laws need to occupy whatever ground the federal authorities allow us to do, which is exactly what the legislature has done already. The second law that will come into play would be the trigger bill, and that was passed in 2019. It has not been challenged. It's just sitting there ready to go if Roe is reversed. And it says if Roe is reversed, abortion is illegal except to save the life of the mother. Then you have the 2021 bill that just says flat out, abortion is illegal in Arkansas except to save the life of the mother. That law has been enjoined in federal court, so it's being litigated even as we speak. But if Roe is reversed, there's a really good case to be made that law then is enforceable. So take your pick. Would it be the trigger bill that the AG's office would take and run with? Would it be the 2021 law that's been enjoined that they would say now can be enforced? How does Amendment 68 come into play there? And then what about some of the old laws that prohibited abortion pre-Roe? Do any of those matter? So there are numerous laws here in Arkansas that all say abortion should be illegal. And so surely one or all or some of those will be upheld if Roe is reversed.
Do you put yourself on the other side for a second, and what would your strategy be moving forward from now until the fall elections? One of the things, that I read was that they hope that this will be used as a platform to get people to actually vote against Republicans because they're going to hold us accountable for all of this effort being put forward.
Well, that strategy might work in a purple state. It's not going to work here in Arkansas. University of Arkansas did a poll recently, and I'll just boil down the results of it. 79% of the people in Arkansas either believe that abortion should be illegal altogether or it should be regulated. And see, Roe v. Wade, a lot of people don't realize this, Roe v. Wade really means that abortion, if you just have it alone, then abortion is essentially unregulated. Abortion was not really regulated that much until Planned Parenthood v. Casey in 1992. So the United States went for about 20 years with just goofy stuff, like 14-year-olds being able to go get an abortion without their parents even knowing about it. And, no parental consent whatsoever. And people argued that that was part of the abortion rights, side of the equation. So I will say this. I think you and I both know, and so do the pro-choice folks, the majority of people in Arkansas are pro-life. And so if you go out here and say, hey, so-and-so is pro-choice or they're in favor of Roe v. Wade or something like that, in elections in Arkansas, that's a severe liability. One of the worst things you can say about a candidate in Arkansas right now is that the candidate is not pro-life. And I never thought I'd live to see that day, but I'm glad it's here, and I'm glad the people of Arkansas have awakened to that. They say follow the science. Hey, that's what we've done. Back in '73, people said, unborn child, just a blob in the belly, no humanity there, no personhood, nothing. But now we can see into the womb. Everybody shows people ultrasounds of their child in the womb. We can take pictures of the child in the womb. We can do surgeries on them. And we know that at 8 weeks or so, they've got fingers and toes and a heartbeat and brain waves and all these human characteristics. And people say, well, it's potential life matter. I say, no. If it's not a human, tell me what it is. Just explain to me what that is in there if it's not a human. And so the science really has propelled this debate in the right direction. And, hey, I'm glad to follow it.
Well, yeah, and people want to use the phrase "follow the science" and use the science, to make your argument. If you want to go back to the conversation about the COVID shots and how that those that were supporting that wanted to use science as the reason why we ought to do things, then you ought to use science to be able to say life begins at conception. I had an email from a young lady, 18 years old, who was railing about the direction that it looked like that the report was going to come out and how we would go this direction and, wanting it to be undone. And, my simple response to her was, well, if you look at the science then, because she believes that life doesn't begin until birth, but if you look at the science, then it is hard to argue life begins at conception, that as soon as the man and woman come together and conception occurs, that's where life begins, and that's where we support it from that point forward. So science is sometimes used for or against the argument, depending on whether you think you're winning or you're losing or how you want to leverage it. But if we just let science speak for itself, then science says that life begins at conception. Of course, we all know that God already said that because he said, I knew you in your mother's womb before you were even formed. So we can even throw in not only the S word of silence, but we can throw in the S word of spirituality too. And this is a time that the two align.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
So let me ask you about this. Your thoughts as far as now because Biden's wanting to get something done at the federal level. One of the articles I read had a comment in there that he wants to work with Congress in order to get it done. We don't control Congress, unfortunately, and so it'll be a clear battle line that'll be drawn. Hopefully there'll be some, hopefully all the Republicans will stick together, number one. Number two, if they don't, those that don't, I think need to, a little bit late this time, but maybe next time around, have opponents, or if they are in a primary, or if the primary will be gone by then. But if, it'll be a pressure on the Republicans that they've got to band together 100% in order to, prevent the Democrats from being able to get anything through in the, in the Congress in the time that they've got control that would undo anything that would come out in the reversal of Roe versus Wade. On the other side, you hope that some Democrats feel the pressure back home, maybe in those purple states or states that are leaning toward red, that they would not go along with Biden and his efforts and the liberal Democrats to be able to change it. How do you see it playing out, or what would be your opinion as far as, is this the opportunity that they're going to take to try to stack the court before they lose control in the fall, given the fact that this has been pushed to the forefront by this leaked report? It creates that discussion for, would they try to stack the court?
Well, we've all talked about that, and I'm really probably not very qualified to answer, other than I watch the news and read like everybody else does. It would seem that this whole vote on codifying Roe is more about grandstanding and playing to the liberal base for people like Nancy Pelosi and some of the others. Most of the pundits that I'm hearing talk about it seem to think that they're not going to get enough votes to codify Roe. As far as the court, one of my concerns is that something might happen to one of the existing conservative justices, and then all of a sudden we end up with another Biden appointee, and then there's some kind of effort in there to reinstate some sort of a Roe-type court ruling. Because just because the court does, if they do overturn Roe and the Casey decision, doesn't mean that that's over. Another court, as we know, can come back and turn it the other way or modify it in some way. So just like this court may be about to overturn Roe, another court down the road sometime could overturn this decision and send it back some other direction. I think Alito's opinion, when I read through it, looked at it, he said, it's been 50, basically, I'll paraphrase, it's been 50 years, and the court has tried and tried and tried to settle the abortion debate by issuing court rulings. There have been numerous U.S. Supreme Court rulings on abortion, and the nation remains as divided now on it as it's ever been. So he's saying this court is incapable of settling the debate on what to do about abortion. And so, therefore, it ought to be sent back to the states and let every state's elected officials work this out. To me, that's pretty much a compromise. The people that are whining about the court overturning Roe, I would look at them and say, listen, the court could have gone farther. They could have looked into the U.S. Constitution very easily and found a right to life and said, not only is Roe overturned, but we're also going to stop any state from legalizing abortion because there's an inherent right to life in the U.S. Constitution. Now, they didn't do that, but they could have, because that's essentially what the court did a few years ago on same-sex marriage. States had laws about same-sex marriage that you couldn't do it. And the court looked out there and said, you know what? All those laws are nullified. You have to recognize it, and you have to allow it. And they forced the states to go against whatever they had on the books. So I guess I would say all that to say right now things look pretty good, but it doesn't mean that we can just all sit back and relax and say, well, we won the fight, because the battle will continue.
Well, and that's the thing. No matter what we do, until the Lord comes back, no matter what we do, this issue is an issue that is going to be fought over. And if one side wins, the other side will try to strategically come back and do something. In your opinion, or just with your experience of dealing with this issue for a long time, what would you say? And let's just take this position. Let's say they come back and they don't reverse Roe versus Wade, or they don't give as much latitude back to the state as we think that they would, as indicated in the brief that was leaked. What do you think we ought to do on our side at that point as far as our next steps? Because we're thinking that we're going to win this thing in either all out or a modified way. But what if we don't? What if something does happen? What's our moves going forward?
Well, that's a real good question, and it's something that we need to be doing even if we win, and that is we have to reduce the demand for abortions. If we went over there right now, you and I went over there this morning, we had the ability to nail the door to the abortion clinic shut over there on Office Park Drive, the demand would still be there, and it would go someplace. What we have to do is work on ways to make abortion irrelevant, to make it so that people say, you know what, there are better choices. I don't, as a woman with an unplanned pregnancy, I don't have to feel like I'm backed into a corner with nowhere to turn. There's enough help out there that I can get through this without killing my baby. And that's an important element in this whole thing. And that circles me back to, like the work that Janet Dixon does down in your district with the pregnancy center, helping girls with unplanned and women with unplanned pregnancies. I think we need to really focus hard on that. And so if the ruling doesn't go our way, I think we pass all the good laws we can, just like we've been doing. But then I think we open a second front in this fight, and we say we're going to make abortion irrelevant. And there's a lot we can do in that area.
All right, got a few minutes left. Any other topics non-related that you'd like to bring up and talk about while I got you on?
Well, there's always a lot going on. I know one of the efforts that we've been working on is encouraging cities and counties to pass pro-life resolutions. And Kim, I know during the 2021 session, you and other lawmakers supported a bill that affirms the ability of cities and counties to pass resolutions declaring themselves to be pro-life. We figured it up the other day. Over 1 million Arkansans now live in counties that have declared themselves to be pro-life. Even Washington County, Fayetteville, declared itself to be a pro-life county. And we're seeing those pop up all over the state. And so we've been encouraging city councils and county quorum courts to pass these resolutions. And let me tell you what that does. That weaves in to the fabric of our culture more pro-life threads. And as we do that, we are upholding the sanctity of human life, and we are affirming that, hey, in Saline County or in Benton or Bryant or wherever, we are pro-life. And, you know, if you want to bring in the spiritual element to it, I really do believe the Bible is true when it says righteousness exalts a nation. And so I think when you take a stand for righteousness, there's a blessing that comes with that. And so, hey, I like being blessed, and I'm sure all the communities in Arkansas like that. So this is something we've been encouraging, and, you know, it's really easy to do. The law is there. It's got the sample resolution written into the law, so all you got to do is copy it. And we've got a little toolkit here at Family Council that we've put together to help people in that area.
I know Bryant recently passed it week before last. I think Saline County passed it a few months ago for the areas. Do you know of any areas that have not passed it?
There have been a couple where it has failed. Russellville was one where it failed, but then they came back and passed it a little later. I think maybe they had some city council members that were absent or something like that. But most of the time when these are introduced, they pass. Lee County, there's a lady over there that set a goal to make every city and town in Lee County pro-life. And I think she fell one little town short. But, you know, that I thought that was a really cool thing to do, to go to all the small towns, and all but one voted to say, yeah, we're pro-life here in this community.
You know, one thing that does, we as a state, we take positions as elected officials, representatives, senators in the legislation. The one thing that does do is it pushes it down to the local level, which that's what we ought to be all about, and that is keep it at the local level as much as you can without us having to get involved. But by pushing it down to the local level, whether that's the alderman on the city council or the JP on the county court, one thing that does is flush out who is really going to reveal themselves as being a conservative, pro-life individual based upon their vote. I got a little bit of an idea that some people may not be very comfortable, because sometimes it's easier to hide behind what we as legislators do at the state level that overlays or imposes on the local level. But when you take issues like this, regardless whatever they are, and you take it right down to the very local level, to the person that lives in your neighborhood, now all of a sudden you're getting a real reflection of who that person is and their core values. That doesn't make absolutely. Yeah, and that doesn't make everybody comfortable, because now the spotlight's on them. It's not on that representative or senator sitting up in Little Rock representing 30,000 or 90,000. Now it's down to that alderman that represents several blocks in a city, or a JP that represents a significant portion of a county, and now the pressure's on them. So that's just an observation.
You know, when the legislature reconvenes, I don't know why we couldn't add to that bill and say, you know what, if a school district wants to declare itself to be pro-life, it can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. In fact, there's something right with that. And so it's a way for local communities to drive a stake in the ground and say, you know what, New York and California may cheer and celebrate abortion and the loss of life. We're not doing that here. And it sends a message to the rest of the community, sends a message to kids at school that hey, we are pro-life here. We're for the unborn. We're for the elderly. We're for the preservation of all innocent life.
And that's not a bad thing.
That's
right.
So true.
All right. You've been listening here to the Kim Hammer Show. Thank you for joining me today. Jerry, any final words before I let you loose?
I think that's about it. Hey, it's been a delight to be on with you, and appreciate your questions, and always enjoy getting to be on the show.
We'll see how this thing plays out, and need to be, we'll come back sometime in June or July after the final determination comes out and have a visit about it. Hopefully we'll have a joyful conversation that the Supreme Court has seen the light, that it was a screw-up 50 years ago, and this is their opportunity to set it straight, and then we can just get about the business of supporting people who need our support at the local level through the pregnancy centers. All right, you've been listening to the Kim Hammer Show. Thank you, Jerry Cox, for joining me. Thank you, Barbara Webb, for joining me earlier in the program. Hope you have a great rest of the Saturday. Look forward to having you back on next week. I have a panel of law enforcement individuals that'll be on next week, and we're going to talk about crime. So I encourage you to tune into the Kim Hammer Show next Saturday, because crime is something that's in all of our life that we don't want to have, and we're going to talk to the experts about what they think about how we can help get a handle on the growing crime rate here in Arkansas and unfortunately in many of our communities. Have a great day.